The new Netflix movie Silverton Siege just released today in celebration of Freedom Day, and I have some thoughts. Of course, these aren't by any means the right thoughts, and I would love to hear yours down in the comments below, but with that, let's get started with the good. Right out of the gate, this movie brings the suspense and thrill that you expect with a film like this. There's tension in the bank between the hostages and our main trio, there's tension between the police force, there's tension with the media, and it all leads to some suspenseful, thrilling scenes. If you've ever seen a suspenseful bank heist movie, the vibe here is pretty similar, but this movie does have one thing in particular that sets it apart, and that's its story. As I said in the intro, this movie was released in celebration and remembrance of Freedom Day. If you don't know, Freedom Day is celebrated in South Africa in remembrance of the day that people of all races were free to vote in the 1994 election. There's obviously a lot more to it than just that, and I would definitely encourage you to study up about the events that lead to this before watching Silverton Siege. I'll be sure to leave a link in the description down below of a resource that you can look at if you want to, so feel free to check that out. But anyway, this movie is based on the actual event of the Silverton Siege, which was a huge mile marker in leading to racial freedom in South Africa. That gives the story of this film so much more heart than most of your run-of-the-mill heist movies. Our leads aren't fighting for money or fame, they're fighting for the freedom of their people. You can really sense that feeling of pain and anger through this film, and you get to see the viewpoint from both sides of the picture. You have our lead trio fighting for the freedoms of the black community, and then you have the cops and some of the hostages whose ignorance leads them to believe that this is the way it should be. While nothing can fully replicate it, I think that this film does a really good job of making you feel at least a little bit of the hurt that the black community felt at this time. And a huge part of what sold that for me was the cast. And I'm 100% going to butcher these names, but this cast deserves a shout out, so I'm gonna give it to them. Tabo Rametsi, Nakolo Dlamini, and Tamisho Masha play their roles with such confidence and heart that I think the audience will really feel every motivation, passion, and fear that drives their characters. If the acting in this film wasn't as great as it is, I don't think that this movie would hit as hard as it does. When our leads are angry, you feel their anger. When they're hurt, you feel devastated for them. And most importantly, when they're advocating for their freedom, you absolutely believe their passion behind it. So yeah, huge shout out to our leads here, a job very well done. And someone else that I'd like to send a job well done to is you, for pressing that like and subscribe button down below. Come on. Here's your round of applause because I know you're doing it right now. I know you're doing it. I know you're pressing it. I believe in you. Very well done. With that being said, let's move on to what I thought was mixed. While I think the characterization of our lead cast is pretty well laid out, I didn't feel the same way about our supporting cast. A lot of our characters here are either a very basic, racist, and inhumane person, or just want to keep the peace. And then with the couple of supporting characters that we do get a deeper look into, their stories just felt a bit forced. I don't really know how to describe it, but there were a few times where we get a deeper sense of our supporting characters, but it just felt a bit out of place and like we shouldn't really be hearing their story right now anyway. And it's sort of a bummer because I think some of these ideas could have been really impactful, but at least for me, they just kind of fell flat. But I definitely liked where they were going, and it wasn't awful, so it goes in my mixed category. Tied in with that, there were a couple moments in here where the script really let me down. There were more than a couple of lines in this that just felt so odd and unnatural. You know when you're watching a film and you almost feel like you're there, and then someone starts saying something that just feels so scripted and fake, and the next thing you know, you're completely out of it? Yeah, that happens here a few times. But that's also mixed in with some really good parts of the script, so I couldn't put this in the bad category. But with that, let's move on to the bad. Really, one of the main problems I have with Silverton Siege is that the education that they put at the end really could have been at the beginning as well. About a third of the way through the runtime of this film, I had to pull my phone out and give myself a quick history lesson about the culture and political climate of South Africa during the time that this was set. The problem is I don't think everybody's gonna do that. Without the full context of what happened at Silverton Siege, what led to it, and what set it forward for the future, so much of this movie is missed. Without that, it's still an intense bank heist type of movie advocating for the black community, but it's not much more than that. If you don't know the context behind this movie, then those big emotional moments just don't mean as much. While I am glad that there was education at the end of the movie, I just wish there could have been some at the beginning to set it up. And the last thing that I didn't think was great for this movie was its sort of tonal confusion. The first 30 minutes of this movie are dedicated to intense, thrilling sequences that have you on the edge of your seat. After that point, we seem to go back and forth between that and drama. While I understand why this was done, I think this makes the movie a bit hard to recommend for suspense junkies because there's a bit of slower, more dramatic dramatic scenes, but also hard to recommend for drama junkies because a lot of this movie is suspenseful and fast-paced. And I don't know, for me it was slightly difficult to stay engaged with this movie when the tone kept going back and forth. With that, let's move on to my final thoughts. If you want to celebrate Freedom Day by watching a movie that's based on actual events that led to racial freedom in South Africa, I think you're gonna really appreciate this movie. If you enjoy suspenseful bank heist type of movies, I think you'd like this film. If you enjoy drama and emotional stories, then I think this is a decent movie for you. Because I think that this was a pretty good film that combines suspense with a really great message, I'm going to go ahead and give Silverton Siege a solid B+. Sure, it has its issues, but when it comes down to it, I think this will be an enjoyable viewing for a lot of people. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to like and subscribe, as I'm going to be reviewing movies and TV shows coming out on all the different streaming platforms you can imagine. That's all for this time, so I'll catch you in the next one.